I stood in the operating room at Stanford Children's Hospital, my gloved hands trembling slightly as I studied the brain scan of a 9-year-old boy. A blood clot was pressing on his motor cortex. One wrong move or a few minutes delay, and he could lose everything. Behind me, a voice I hadn't heard in 9 years cut through the sterile silence. "Madison, please save my grandson." I froze. That voice. I would have known it anywhere. I turned, and there she was, Elaine Mitchell, the woman who had once shattered my life, now begging me for help. But before I could lower the scalpel, the past came rushing back like a wave I could never outrun. 9 years ago, I was just another overworked medical student, finishing my final year in pediatric neurosurgery at Stanford. I came from a modest family, nothing like the tech dynasties that filled Silicon Valley. Then I met Ryan Mitchell. Ryan was different from anyone I had ever known. He wasn't flashy, even though his family practically owned half the medical technology industry. He didn't carry himself like a rich kid. He carried himself like someone who believed in changing the world. He spent afternoons sitting through lectures on biomedical innovation, but he preferred grabbing lunch with me on the Stanford Quad instead of dining at some high-end club in San Francisco. His smile, it disarmed me in ways I couldn't explain. We started dating, slowly at first, then all at once. Those late-night drives in his silver Tesla through the quiet streets of Palo Alto became our sanctuary. He'd talk about reshaping children's health care through tech, and I'd talk about saving lives with steady hands and a stubborn heart. It felt like our dreams were aligned, and I fell for him completely. When Ryan proposed in the hillside garden overlooking Los Altos Hills, I cried. He dropped to one knee, holding out a simple but elegant ring. "Madison Blake, will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation. For a moment, the world felt perfectly whole. I thought love could overcome anything. I was wrong. The Mitchells weren't just wealthy, they were powerful. Ryan's father was a visionary CEO, while his mother, Elaine Mitchell, was a former high-powered attorney turned head of a multimillion-dollar medical charity. They lived in a world of private jets and exclusive foundations. And me? I was the daughter of a small-town accountant who had scraped her way through Stanford on scholarships and part-time jobs. The first time I met Elaine, the air felt heavy, almost electric. She smiled politely, but her eyes were cold and calculating, scanning me as if I were an unsolved legal case she intended to win. Every question she asked was laced with implication. Where I came from, what my ambitions were, whether I belonged anywhere near her son. I smiled back, clinging to the belief that Ryan's love would be enough. It wasn't. Elaine didn't stop there. She hired investigators to dig into my past and handed Ryan a neat little package of photos from my college years. Shots of me out to dinner with guys who happened to be wealthy, photos that meant nothing but painted an ugly picture if you wanted them to. Ryan showed up at my apartment one night, holding that stack of photos like evidence. "Madison, I just need to know, is what we have real? Or are you just looking for a way out of the life you came from?" His words cut deeper than any scalpel I'd ever hold. I couldn't believe he was questioning my love, not after everything we had shared. We fought, loud, bitter, heartbreaking. In the end, I took off the ring and placed it in his hand. "If you can't trust me, then what's left?" I walked out and never looked back. I didn't know that would be the last time I'd ever see Ryan alive. I remember standing in my apartment the next morning, staring at the engagement ring on the counter, the one I'd ripped off my finger hours earlier. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out my heart and left only the echo of our argument behind. I kept telling myself Ryan would come back, apologize, and realize how cruel his words had been. But my phone never rang. Instead, that night I got a message from Elaine. A simple, cold line of text. "Perhaps it's best for everyone if you move on." I wanted to believe Ryan had nothing to do with it, but part of me wondered if he agreed. For days, I tried to throw myself into studying for my final clinical rotations, but no amount of textbooks could silence the image of Ryan's face, the way his eyes hardened when he asked if our love was real. I kept replaying my own voice, sharp and angry, saying, "If you can't trust me, then what's left?" A week later, I walked across the Stanford campus, pretending life was normal when a friend from our residency program caught up with me. "Hey, did you hear about Ryan? He's been pulling crazy hours at his dad's company. Something about proving himself to the board." I nodded, but inside I knew what it meant. Elaine had gotten to him. 2 weeks later, I saw Ryan again, for the last time while he was still breathing. He came by late in the evening, rain soaking his jacket. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd come to make things right. Instead, he stood there, eyes red, exhausted. "Madison, maybe my mom's right. Maybe we come from two different worlds." I stared at him, barely able to breathe. "Are you saying you don't love me?" He shook his head. "I'm saying love might not be enough." I don't even remember what I said back. Something about trust, about how real love means fighting for each other, not walking away. But the words didn't matter. His face said everything. When he turned and walked out into the rain, something inside me cracked, and it never fully healed. That night, he drove too fast down the slick, winding road toward Los Altos Hills. Witnesses said his car skidded, hit the guardrail, and flipped. The paramedics said he died on impact. I got the call at 2:13 a.m. "Are you listed as Ryan Mitchell's emergency contact?" the voice asked. "Yes, why?" "What happened?" "There's been an accident." "I'm sorry, ma'am, he didn't make it." My knees gave out, and I collapsed on the floor, the phone clattering beside me. The next morning, I went to the hospital where they'd taken him. My body felt like it belonged to someone else as I walked through those white halls, the smell of antiseptic thick in the air. At the far end of the corridor, Elaine stood waiting, her hair perfectly styled despite the chaos, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. When she saw me, her mouth tightened. "What are you doing here?" "They called me. I was his emergency contact." My voice barely worked. Her eyes narrowed, and in that moment, all the polite mask she'd ever worn dropped away. You're the reason he was out there. You're the reason he's dead." The words hit harder than any physical blow. "Elaine, I never wanted this. Save your excuses." She stepped closer, her voice low, cold. "You latched onto my son because of who he was, and when things didn't go your way, you broke him. You killed him as surely as if you'd driven that car off the road yourself." I opened my mouth to protest, but nothing came out. She turned on her heel and walked away, heels clicking against the tile like a judge pounding the gavel. Guilty, case closed. For weeks after, I drifted through life in a haze. Classes blurred together, conversations faded into static. At night, I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wishing I could turn back time, wishing I could take back every harsh word I'd ever said to him. One night, I found myself on the bathroom floor, staring at a bottle of sleeping pills. My hands shook as I held it. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to feel like this anymore. Then I remembered something. The last late night drive we'd taken together. Ryan had held my hand at a stoplight and said, "Whatever happens, you're going to be an incredible doctor someday. You'll save lives." I set the bottle down and sobbed until sunrise. The next week, I noticed something else, something life-changing. My period was late. At first, I told myself it was stress, but then I bought a test more out of fear than hope. When the 2 pink lines appeared, I sank to the floor, pressing my hands to my stomach. "Oh my God," I whispered. I was carrying Ryan's child. That tiny heartbeat inside me became the reason I got out of bed each morning. For the first time since his death, I had a reason to keep going. But I had no idea that this miracle would soon turn into my greatest heartbreak. Pregnancy alone is never easy, but carrying the child of a man you just buried? It's like running a marathon with broken legs. I dragged myself through each day, my belly growing as my grief settled deeper into my bones. Ryan's parents never reached out, not even once. Elaine made it clear at the funeral. Her cold eyes said everything. I wasn't welcome. So I focused on surviving. I worked long hours at a local clinic to pay the bills and pushed through my rotations at Stanford. Every night, I'd sit on the edge of my bed, one hand on my stomach, whispering, "We're going to be okay, little one. I promise." When the first kick came, I cried. For the first time in months, the tears weren't from grief, but something closer to hope. This baby was a piece of Ryan, the only piece I had left. The day of delivery came early on a rainy spring morning. My water broke in the middle of charting patient notes, and within an hour I was being wheeled into the labor room at Stanford Children's Hospital. The pain was blinding, the contractions so strong I thought I might pass out. Nurses hurried around me, adjusting 4 lines and monitors. Through the chaos, I clung to one thought: I'll finally hold him. I'll finally see Ryan's eyes again. "Push, Madison. You're almost there," the nurse said. I bore down with everything I had, screaming as the baby's first cries echoed through the room. Cries that stopped too soon. "What's wrong? Why isn't he crying?" I gasped, chest heaving. The nurse's expression tightened. A doctor appeared beside her, voice calm but tense. "There's an issue with breathing. We need to move quickly." I watched in shock as my baby was rushed across the room to an incubator. The faintest cry reached my ears, then silence. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the doctor came over, removing his gloves slowly, almost hesitantly. "I'm so sorry." The cord was wrapped around his neck. We did everything we could. Everything inside me broke at once. No, that's not possible. I heard him. He cried. The nurse tried to comfort me, but I thrashed, reaching for the incubator. "Let me hold him, please. Let me hold my baby." Instead of my son, I felt a sharp prick in my arm and a wave of sedation pulled me under. When I woke hours later, the room was silent, too silent. A bundle rested on a chair near the window, a tiny blanket folded neatly around a small, lifeless weight. I lifted the blanket, staring at the pale little face inside. But something in me screamed, "This isn't him. This isn't my baby," I whispered. The nurse exchanged glances with another staff member. "Madison, you've been through a lot. It's shock. This is your son." But I knew deep in my bones, this wasn't the child I had felt kick beneath my ribs, the baby whose heartbeat I had listened to at every appointment. This face was different. Grief swallowed my protest. I couldn't fight anymore. I kissed the cold forehead and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby boy." The funeral was small, just me and a few classmates who cared enough to come. Elaine never appeared, though later I learned she had sent flowers on behalf of the Mitchell family. I tore the card up before I even finished reading it. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain. I barely ate, barely slept. One night, I found myself sitting on the floor, clutching the tiny hospital bracelet they'd given me, the one that should have been on my baby's wrist. My world had already ended when Ryan died, but now it felt like fate had salted the earth so nothing could ever grow again. Yet somewhere inside, a small, bitter voice whispered, "You have to move. You have to keep going." So I did. But the woman I had been, she was gone. I didn't know it then, but the moment I blacked out after giving birth was the moment everything I believed about the world shifted. Later, I would learn pieces of the truth, whispers from a nurse who had retired, fragments of hospital records that didn't add up, and one devastating confession that came far too late. But back then, I thought my son had died. Elaine Mitchell had been there that night. I didn't see her. I was unconscious when it happened, but she was there. She had pulled strings to get into the delivery wing and spoken quietly to a doctor she had funded for years. "She's not stable," Elaine reportedly said. "You know what's best for the baby." Those words were all it took. In a world where donations and power spoke louder than ethics, decisions were made that erased my motherhood before it even began. When I woke up holding what I believed was my lifeless child, I accepted it because grief makes you blind. The nurse's eyes lingered on me longer than necessary, and I would later realize it was guilt, not pity, that filled them. But at that time, I didn't know. All I knew was that the only piece of Ryan I had left had been ripped away, and I had no fight left to stop it. Days passed like fog rolling over an empty city. I withdrew from everything, my friends, my studies, even the thought of ever loving again. My apartment became a place where silence screamed, and every corner held reminders of what I'd lost. The crib still in its box, the baby clothes folded neatly in drawers, the tiny shoes I had bought on a whim when I first felt him kick. But what I didn't know was that somewhere across town in the Mitchell estate, my baby, my Noah, was alive. Elaine had taken him home, given him another name, and introduced him to the world as her grandchild. For years, I buried myself in medicine. I told myself the pain would dull if I focused on something bigger than me, something noble. So I worked double shifts, picked up every case I could, and forced myself to climb the ranks until I earned a fellowship in pediatric neurosurgery at Stanford Children's Hospital. If anyone looked at me from the outside, they'd say I was thriving. But inside, I was just surviving, moving on autopilot, trying to fill the endless hole Ryan and our baby had left behind. I never dated again. I couldn't. My heart had shut down, not out of fear of being hurt, but because I couldn't imagine ever loving anyone enough to risk feeling that kind of pain again. It was almost 9 years later when fate decided I'd punished myself long enough. It was an ordinary Thursday morning, quiet except for the sound of my sneakers on the hospital floor. I was halfway through reviewing charts when the trauma pager went off. Child, male, 9 head trauma. Possible cranial bleed. Prepare or 3. I met the gurney at the door and froze. The boy had Ryan's eyes. My breath caught, my hands instinctively gripping the rail. "What's his name?" I asked the EMT. "Noah Mitchell," he said. The world tilted beneath me. Mitchell. My stomach clenched as if someone had sucker punched me. And then I heard it, the voice that had haunted my nightmares for nearly a decade. "Madison, please, save him." Elaine Mitchell stood there, older now, her hair streaked with silver, her face lined in ways wealth couldn't smooth away. But her eyes, they hadn't changed. I wanted to scream at her, to ask why she was there, why she still dared to speak my name. But the boy on the table groaned softly, snapping me back to reality. This wasn't about me. It was about saving him. "Get me a CT scan and prep for OR," I said sharply, my voice steady even as my heart thundered. During surgery, I shut out everything except the boy's fragile brain under my hands. Every move was deliberate, every suture precise. I didn't think about Ryan. I didn't think about Elaine. I didn't think about the life that had been stolen from me. But when the last stitch was tied and the monitor steadied, I allowed myself one glance at his face. His eyelashes fluttered, and for a second, I could almost believe it. Almost. Hours later, standing outside the recovery room, Elaine approached me. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if life itself had humbled her. "Thank you," she said softly. I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on the boy through the glass. And then I saw it, a familiar hospital bracelet, old and worn, hanging from his wrist like a charm. My breath caught. That bracelet. I had made it 9 years ago, when I thought my baby had died. My hands shook as I whispered, "Where did he get that?" Elaine's face paled, her lips parting as if words were too heavy to form. When you lose everything, you either break completely or you rebuild into something unrecognizable. I chose the second option, though for a long time it didn't feel like a choice at all. After what I believed was Noah's death, I poured every ounce of grief and rage into medicine. It was the only thing that made sense, the only place where hard work still gave you predictable results. I spent years in windowless labs, sterile ORs, and libraries that smelled like paper and desperation. By the time I finished my residency, I was a machine. Colleagues called me the hands of glass and steel. Glass because of my precision, steel because of how unshakable I seemed during impossible cases. Patients' parents would clasp my hands and thank me with tears in their eyes, but their gratitude bounced off the hollow shell I had become. I didn't date. I didn't make small talk. I didn't go home for holidays because there was no home left, just an empty apartment and memories that clawed at me whenever I sat still for too long. But I climbed. Oh, I climbed. By 32, I had become one of the youngest attending pediatric neurosurgeons at Stanford Children's Hospital. People whispered about me in the halls, calling me brilliant, resilient, unstoppable. What they didn't know was that I hadn't felt truly alive in 9 years. And then came Noah Mitchell, the boy who turned all my carefully built walls to dust. When I had first seen him lying unconscious on that gurney, something deep inside me had shifted. At first, I told myself it was because of his eyes, the exact shade and shape as Ryan's. But that wasn't it. It was the way my hands trembled, just slightly when I touched his hair to check for scalp lacerations. It was the way my chest tightened every time his monitors beeped. And when I noticed that old, worn hospital bracelet on his wrist, my entire world tilted. I hadn't thought about that bracelet in years, but now it was all I could think about. I had made it myself, on the last day of my prenatal crafting class. A tiny blue cord with a single silver bead, etched with an N for Noah. My Noah. After the surgery, I tried to ignore the questions clawing at my brain. I told myself, coincidences happen. There are plenty of boys named Noah, plenty of families who donate to hospitals and get old bracelets as keepsakes. But deep down, something inside me whispered, no, Madison, this is him. That night, I went home and sat on the floor of my apartment, pulling out the shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were all the memories I'd tried to bury. Ultrasound photos, baby clothes, and the matching bracelet I had kept for myself. I compared it to what I'd seen on that boy's wrist earlier that day. It wasn't just similar, it was identical, down to the tiny imperfection in the silver bead, the one I'd accidentally scratched when trying to engrave it by hand. A chill ran through me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The next morning, I found myself in the hospital cafeteria staring at a cup of coffee gone cold, my mind replaying every memory from the day I gave birth. The sedation, the unfamiliar nurse, Elaine showing up at the funeral but never looking me in the eye. Pieces started snapping together, like a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. Elaine had been there. Elaine had influence. Elaine had hated me enough to say I didn't belong in her family. What if my son had never died? That question was still echoing in my head when I saw Elaine again in the hallway outside Noah's recovery room. She looked smaller somehow, older, like time had been unkind in ways even her money couldn't fix. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in 9 years, I saw something I never expected from her. Fear. Elaine, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. We need to talk. Elaine stood frozen when I said those words. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to face her again, the woman who had looked at me as if I were a stain on her perfect life. I thought I'd feel rage or maybe satisfaction. Instead, I felt empty, like someone bracing for an impact that had been coming for nearly a decade. She cleared her throat, the same crisp, commanding sound I remembered from the funeral. This isn't the time, Madison. My grandson just went through major surgery. Your grandson? My voice cracked, sharper than I intended. That bracelet on his wrist. Where did it come from? Her eyes flicked away for half a second, and in that tiny break of eye contact, I saw it. Guilt. I don't know what you're implying, she said, her voice thinner now, but you saved his life. That should be all that matters. No, I stepped closer, lowering my voice. 9 years ago, I gave birth at this hospital. My son, was declared dead because of a cord accident. And yet your grandson has the same bracelet I made with my own hands before he was even born. How is that possible, Elaine? How? For the first time in her life, she looked cornered. Elaine Mitchell, the woman who could shred opponents in courtrooms and charity boards alike, actually stepped back. Her perfectly composed mask cracked, and I saw something behind it, fear and shame. She tried to recover. Madison, you were sedated. You'd been through trauma. You don't know what you saw. I know exactly what I saw. And I know you were there that night. My voice shook, not from uncertainty, but from finally saying aloud what I'd buried for nearly a decade. You took him, didn't you? You took my son. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. That silence told me everything. I leaned against the wall, dizzy. Why? Was hating me that much easier than letting your son marry someone you thought wasn't good enough? You thought stealing my child would fix what? Your reputation, your grief. Elaine's hand flew to her mouth as if holding back tears. You don't understand. Ryan was gone, and I couldn't lose his child too. Not to you. Her words cut through me like glass. Not to me. He was mine, Elaine. My baby, my blood. You let me believe he died. You watched me bury an empty casket. She crumpled, her back hitting the wall, her eyes finally spilling tears. I thought I was protecting him, and yes, I was angry. You took him away when you left Ryan. I told myself you didn't deserve him, that Noah deserved a better life. And I had the means to give him one. I stared at her, numb. You played God with my life. Do you have any idea what you did to me? To him? He grew up thinking you were his mother figure when all along he had one who loved him before he even took his first breath. Elaine slid down to the floor, the powerful matriarch now looking small and breakable. I have brain cancer, she whispered. Stage 4. I don't have much time left. I froze. Part of me wanted to laugh at the irony. Another part wanted to scream. So what? You want forgiveness because you're dying? Because now it's convenient to admit what you did. She shook her head weakly. No, I want him to know the truth. I want him to know you. I was wrong, Madison. I've known it for years, but I was too proud, too stubborn. I've ruined everything, and I don't know how to fix it. The storm inside me quieted, but it didn't vanish. There was no undoing 9 years of grief, no way to return the moments I lost. His first words, his first steps, his first day of school. Yet, as I looked through the glass at Noah, sleeping peacefully after surgery, something softened in me. For 9 years, he had been safe, cared for, loved, even if it was by the woman who had stolen him. I crouched down so I was eye level with Elaine. You tell him, I said firmly. Not me. You tell him who I am and what you did. Because I won't take that from him. Not the truth, not the chance to hear it from you. Her eyes widened, then she nodded slowly. I will. I promise. I stood and walked toward Noah's room. I placed my hand on the glass, looking at his tiny chest rising and falling. There was no mistaking it now. This was my son. And whether Elaine lived another month or another year, I would not lose him again. The next morning, I walked into Noah's hospital room to find him sitting up, pale but awake, a tablet in his hands. He looked up at me, his wide hazel eyes blinking in curiosity. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Those eyes, Ryan's eyes. Hey there, I said softly, my voice almost catching. How are you feeling? He shrugged, the kind of shy movement kids make when they're trying to be tough. My head hurts, but Grandma says I'm brave. Grandma. My chest tightened, but I smiled anyway. She's right about that. You were incredibly brave yesterday. Noah nodded, then turned back to his game, as if bravery was just another item on his to-do list. Behind me, I heard the slow tap of a cane, Elaine, moving slower than I'd ever seen her. She looked fragile, wrapped in a soft gray shawl, her usual perfection dulled by illness and guilt. Noah, she said gently, taking a seat beside his bed. There's something we need to talk about. Something important. He looked up again, eyebrows furrowing. Is it bad news? No, sweetheart. It's about family. She glanced at me, her eyes brimming with tears, then back at him. Do you remember how I told you your mom passed away when you were born? He nodded cautiously. That wasn't true, she whispered. Noah stared at her, confusion flickering across his face. What do you mean? Elaine swallowed hard, her hands trembling. Your mother didn't die. She's alive, and she's standing right here. Noah's gaze swung toward me, his lips parting slightly. You're my mom? I stepped closer, every muscle in my body trembling. Yes, Noah, I'm your mom. I've loved you since the moment I knew you were coming into this world, and I never stopped. He blinked, trying to process something no 9-year-old should have to. But Grandma said, she lied. Elaine interrupted, voice breaking. I lied, Noah. I was angry and scared, and I did something unforgivable. I took you from her. I thought I was protecting you, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. The room went silent except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Noah stared at both of us, his small hands twisting in his lap. So, you're my real mom? Yes, baby, I whispered, my knees bending so I could be level with him. I'm your mom. I missed your first words, your first steps, your first day of school, because I didn't know you were alive. But I'm here now, and I'm never leaving you again. Noah's lip trembled. Then he said the one word I had dreamed of hearing for 9 long years. Mom! I wrapped my arms around him, holding him gently so I wouldn't hurt his head. His small arms circled my neck hesitantly at first, then tighter, warmer, more certain. When I looked up, Elaine was crying silently. She reached out a hand, and I took it, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement of what this moment meant. Over the next few days, Noah and I talked for hours. He asked questions, some easy, some hard. Why hadn't I been there? Why did Grandma say I was gone? Did I love him? Would I take him away from everything he knew? I answered every question with honesty. I didn't know Noah. I thought you were gone. But now that I have you, I won't let go again. And yes, I love you. More than anything. Elaine spent most of her time quietly watching us, her illness seeming to progress faster, as though confessing had finally let her body surrender. One evening, she took my hand and whispered, "Thank you for not hating me enough to keep him from me now." I didn't know how I felt about forgiveness yet, but I knew this. Hate wouldn't raise Noah into the kind of man Ryan would have wanted him to be. The day before Elaine was discharged to hospice, she called Noah to her bedside. Be strong, sweetheart, and listen to your mom. She's everything I wasn't brave enough to be. He nodded, eyes glassy, and hugged her tightly. For the first time, I saw something genuine between them, not built on lies or control, but on truth finally spoken aloud. As I tucked Noah into bed that night, he whispered, "Mom, can we start over? Like from today?" I kissed his forehead, tears burning my eyes. Yes, baby, from today. Elaine passed away 2 weeks later. It was quiet, almost peaceful, like a candle flame finally surrendering after burning too brightly for too long. She had requested hospice care at home, and I stayed with Noah through it all. I didn't do it for her, I did for him. On her last night, Elaine asked to see me alone. I stood by her bedside, unsure what I was supposed to feel. "You don't owe me forgiveness," she said, her voice fragile, paper-thin. "But promise me you'll love him enough for both of us." I hesitated, then nodded. I already do." She smiled faintly, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Then I can rest." Minutes later, she was gone. The days after her passing were strange. There was no dramatic reading of a will, no surprise fortune waiting for me. I didn't expect one, but Elaine did leave one thing that surprised me, a letter addressed to Noah. He sat on the living room couch, holding it like it was something dangerous. "Should I read it, Mom?" "Only if you want to," I said softly, kneeling beside him. He unfolded it slowly, lips moving silently as he read. After a moment, he sniffled and handed it to me. She said she was sorry and that she always loved me, even when she made bad choices. I pulled him into my arms, holding him as he cried, not the loud, broken cries of someone whose world is falling apart, but the quiet tears of a boy who finally understands the truth. Legally, things moved quickly. Elaine had already signed papers transferring guardianship to me before she passed. There was no battle, no drawn-out court hearing, just a clean handover as if the universe itself wanted this chapter to close. Still, there were challenges. Noah had questions at night, when the house was quiet and shadows stretched long across the walls. "Mom, did you hate her?" he asked one evening as I tucked him into bed. I paused. I did for a long time. But hate, it keeps you stuck. And I don't want to be stuck anymore. I want to move forward with you. He stared at me, his eyes so much like Ryan's had hurt. "Do you think Dad would be proud of me?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "I know he would. And he'd be proud of you for how brave you've been." Noah adjusted to living with me faster than I expected. He helped me cook, left little drawings on my desk at work, and asked 1,000 questions about my life before he knew me. One evening, he brought me an old photo frame he'd found in his things at Elaine's house. It was a picture of Ryan, barely older than Noah was now, holding a tiny airplane model. "Grandma said he loved planes," Noah said. "Is that true?" "Yes," I said, my throat tight. He wanted to learn to fly one day. Noah smiled faintly. "Can we go see airplanes sometime?" I hugged him. "We can do anything you want, baby." Weeks later, when Noah had fully recovered from his surgery, we decided to do something to mark the start of our new life together. We packed a picnic and drove to Half Moon Bay, one of the few places near Palo Alto where the world still feels wild and untamed. The sun was low when we reached the beach, casting everything in soft, golden light. Noah ran ahead, kicking off his shoes and letting the cold Pacific water wash over his feet. "Come on, Mom," he called, waving. I laughed and chased after him, my heart lighter than it had been in years. We walked along the shoreline, leaving footprints that disappeared as the waves kissed them away. At one point, Noah crouched down and began building something in the sand. When I asked what it was, he said, "It's a runway for Dad, so he can land when he visits." I knelt beside him, tears stinging my eyes, and together we built that tiny runway, two people piecing together something bigger than either of us could explain. When it was done, Noah placed the little airplane model, Ryan's old one he had brought from home, at the edge. "He's home now," he whispered. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him close. "Yes, baby, he is." As the sun dipped into the ocean, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, Noah looked up at me. "Mom, do you think we can start over? Just us? Like it's a brand new life?" I smiled, pulling him into a hug. "We already have. Today is day one." He grinned, that wide, gap-toothed smile only kids can make look so perfect, and whispered, "I love you, Mom." My throat tightened as I whispered back, "I love you too, Noah. Always." We stood there, arms wrapped around each other, the ocean roaring behind us and the wind carrying away everything old and broken. For the first time in 9 years, I felt whole. No longer Madison Blake, the grieving mother who lost everything, but Madison Blake, the woman who had fought her way back to life, love, and family. And as I held my son close, I knew this was only the beginning.